He had been gone for 2 days. Not because of an injury. Not because of a roster move or a disciplinary issue or any of the usual reasons a star player's name disappears from a lineup card without warning. He had been gone because somewhere away from the stadium, away from the cameras that follow him everywhere else, his wife had given birth to their second child. The Dodgers didn't even put him on the official paternity list. There was no maximum leave clock ticking down somewhere in the background. He would come back when he was ready to come back, and not a moment before. 2 days later, he was ready. He walked back into a clubhouse that had just spent a tense, low-scoring game clawing to stay within reach, and within hours, in the kind of inning that asks everything of a team that has nearly run out of innings to give, Shohei Ohtani stepped into the batter's box and reminded everyone exactly what his return meant. 16th home run of the season. A comeback that, just moments earlier, had felt like it was slipping away for good. It started with a lineup card. Friday afternoon, hours before first pitch against the Orioles, reporters waiting outside the clubhouse noticed something unusual. The lineup had been released 2 hours later than normal, and when it finally appeared, Ohtani's name wasn't on it. For a roster that had spent stretches of the season managing his health carefully, knee soreness, a blister that had been a minor topic of conversation in recent weeks, the immediate assumption among reporters was the obvious one. Something physical. Something that had quietly worsened. Then the Dodgers issued a short statement, and the entire tone of the day shifted. Ohtani was away from the team. On paternity leave. He and his wife, Mamiko Tanaka, were expecting their second child. The reaction inside the press box was almost gentle by comparison to the usual intensity of Ohtani news cycles, less analysis, more genuine warmth. Reporters who had spent the previous year writing about his pitching workload and his MVP case and his health status found themselves, for one afternoon, writing about something simpler. A father, away from the field, present for the most important moment a family can share. The Dodgers won that night without him, a walk-off victory that kept the clubhouse's energy high even in his absence. Kyle Tucker slid into the leadoff spot. A rookie took his place at designated hitter. The lineup adjusted, the way lineups always adjust around the absence of a single player, no matter how irreplaceable that player usually seems. By Saturday morning, the news was official. Ohtani and Tanaka had welcomed their second child. A statement, posted jointly to social media, kept the same quiet, private tone the couple had maintained throughout. No name. No revealed gender, beyond a photograph of a newborn wrapped in a blue blanket. Just gratitude, expressed simply, the way the couple had expressed it before, 14 months earlier, when their daughter was born. "We are again overjoyed to experience this wonderful day in our lives together," the statement read. "Thank you for being born safely." The Dodgers said he was expected back with the team sometime over the weekend. When Ohtani walked into the clubhouse the following day, teammates greeted him the way teammates greet a man who has just become a father for the second time: handshakes, embraces, the kind of genuine warmth that exists in a clubhouse separate from anything happening on the field. He didn't talk much about it publicly. That has always been his pattern, going back to the birth of his first child. The details of his family life remain, by his own design, almost entirely separate from the version of himself the public sees. No interviews about sleepless nights. No public reflections on fatherhood reshaping his perspective. Just a brief acknowledgement, through his interpreter, that he and his family were doing well, and that he was grateful for the support the organization and the fans had shown. Then he turned his attention back to baseball. The Dodgers needed him. The team had been treading water across a stretch of close, difficult games, the kind of stretch that doesn't generate panic on its own but accumulates a certain pressure the longer it continues. His return to the lineup wasn't just a personal milestone. It was, immediately, a competitive necessity. Roberts didn't rush him into a full workload. The plan, from the start, was measured: ease him back into the lineup as a hitter first, let the rotation adjust around him for a few days before any conversation about his next start on the mound. But measured didn't mean quiet. The game that followed his return settled quickly into the kind of tense, low-scoring rhythm that makes broadcasters lean forward in their seats even when the score itself doesn't look dramatic on paper. Both starting pitchers worked efficiently through the middle innings. Defense, on both sides, turned what might have been rally-extending hits into routine outs. The kind of baseball that rewards patience from anyone watching, not flashy, but tightly contested, every half-inning carrying slightly more weight than the one before it. By the seventh inning, the Dodgers trailed. Not by an insurmountable margin, but enough that the deficit had started to feel, in the way deficits do late in close games, like the defining fact of the night rather than a temporary inconvenience. The bullpen held the line. Inning after inning, relief pitchers kept the gap from widening, buying time for an offense that had been generating chances without consistently finishing them. By the time the late innings arrived, the stadium had settled into the specific, charged quiet of a crowd that hasn't given up but has stopped expecting anything easy. Ohtani came to the plate with the game still hanging in the balance, the kind of moment that, on a normal week, would have been notable purely for its competitive stakes. This was not a normal week. 2 days removed from the birth of his second child, having missed a game to be present for one of the most significant moments a family can share, he stepped into the batter's box with the same stillness, the same unreadable composure, that has become his signature in moments exactly like this one. The count worked the way his at-bats often work, patient, deliberate, a hitter willing to let pitches he doesn't want pass by without urgency, trusting that the pitch he's looking for will eventually arrive if he's disciplined enough to wait for it. It arrived in the middle of the count. A fastball that caught more of the plate than the pitcher intended, the kind of mistake that happens even in a well-executed outing when fatigue and pressure accumulate across the later innings of a tight game. Ohtani's swing was immediate and complete. The contact was unmistakable, the specific sound that doesn't require watching the ball's flight to know exactly what has happened. It carried deep, well beyond the reach of any outfielder, disappearing into the stands as the crowd, quiet for most of the night, erupted into the kind of sustained, full-throated noise that only a moment like this one can produce. 16th home run of the season. The deficit erased. The stadium, which had spent most of the night in tense, anxious silence, suddenly alive with the specific energy of a crowd that believes again. The Dodgers' dugout exploded the way dugouts explode after a home run that changes a game's entire emotional trajectory, players on their feet, helmets and equipment momentarily forgotten, the genuine, unguarded joy that defines baseball at its best. But for teammates who knew what Ohtani had been through over the previous 2 days, the celebration carried an additional layer. This wasn't simply a clutch home run from their best player. It was a clutch home run from a teammate who had spent the past 48 hours becoming a father for the second time, who had barely had time to process that experience before stepping back into the most demanding version of his professional life. Roberts, watching from his usual position near the dugout rail, allowed himself a rare, visible smile. He comes back from something like that, something that big, that personal, and within a day he's doing this, Roberts said afterward. I don't know how to fully explain what that says about him. I just know I'm grateful he's on our side. A reporter asked whether the timing felt symbolic in any way, a player returning from the birth of his child and immediately producing a moment that pulled his team back from the brink. Roberts considered the question, careful, as always, not to overstate something that belonged primarily to Ohtani and his family. I'll just say this. Whatever he's got going on in his life outside this stadium, and we try to give him as much privacy with that as we can, it doesn't seem to take anything away from what he brings in here. If anything, tonight, you'd argue the opposite. The home run shifted the game's entire emotional weather, but it didn't end the contest by itself. The Dodgers still needed to close it out, and the final innings carried their own tension as the bullpen worked to protect the lead Ohtani's swing had created. It held. Narrowly, the way these games often hold, with traffic on the bases in the final inning that required a difficult defensive sequence to finish cleanly. But it held. The Dodgers won. A game that had felt, for most of the night, like it was slipping steadily away, instead became a comeback story, defined, unmistakably, by a single swing from a player who had barely had time to process the most significant personal news of his year before delivering it. In the clubhouse afterward, the conversation moved fluidly between two different kinds of celebration: the competitive joy of a difficult, hard-fought win, and the simpler, more human joy of congratulating a teammate on the birth of his second child. Ohtani, asked briefly about the home run, kept his answer characteristically understated. "I just wanted to help the team win," he said through his interpreter. "That's all I was thinking about up there." Asked whether becoming a father for the second time had changed anything about how he approached the at-bat, he smiled slightly, a rare, visible flicker of something beyond his usual composed focus. "I don't think about it that way when I'm at the plate. But I'm happy. My family is healthy. That's what matters most today." It was a brief answer. Characteristically private, characteristically focused on the team rather than himself. But for those who have followed his career closely, who understand how rarely he allows the public any real window into his life beyond the field, even that small acknowledgement carried weight. There are athletes whose personal milestones exist entirely separate from their professional ones, moments that happen quietly, away from any stadium, with no bearing on what comes next on the field. For 2 days, that was the shape of this story. A father, away from his team, present for the birth of his second child, the baseball world pausing its usual analysis to offer something simpler. Congratulations. Warmth. The universal recognition that some moments matter more than any game. And then he came back. Not gradually. Not with the careful reacclimation that might be expected of any other player returning from a significant personal absence. He came back and, within a single tense, tightly contested game, delivered the kind of swing that pulled his team back from the edge of a difficult loss. 16 home runs into a season already defined by extraordinary performances, this one will be remembered differently than the others, not simply for what it did to the scoreboard, but for the 2 days that preceded it. A reminder that behind the records and the historic numbers and the relentless competitive focus, there is simply a man, recently a father for the second time, who walked back onto a baseball field and reminded everyone what he's capable of. The stadium got its comeback. His family got him back, even if only for a few hours before the next road trip. Both things mattered. Both things were true.